The mayor's wife walked into Judge Judy's courtroom like she owned the building, but nobody expected what came next. She didn't sit. She didn't wait. She leaned in and whispered, "You should rise when I enter." And that one sentence flipped the entire courtroom upside down. Cameras zoomed in, the gallery gasped, and Judge Judy's face froze into the calm expression she only makes right before destroying someone. What happened in the next 3 minutes? The mayor's wife never recovered from. But before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Don't forget the subscribe button. The mayor's wife paused in the doorway, letting every pair of eyes settle on her the way heat settles on asphalt. Diamonds glimmered against the harsh fluorescent lights, scattering tiny flecks of cold brightness across the walls. She lifted her chin, soaking in the attention like a plant too pampered to know drought existed. The gallery murmured, small sounds of unease rippling through the rows. The plaintiff, a soft-spoken community organizer named Mariah, shrank back instinctively, clutching a worn folder filled with evidence she had rehearsed explaining 100 times. But all that preparation seemed to dissolve under the weight of the woman entering the room. The mayor's wife did not sit. She did not even glance at the chair waiting for her. Instead, she stepped toward the center of the courtroom and placed one manicured hand on the edge of the defendant's table, as if claiming ownership of the entire space. The camera in the corner hummed, the air conditioner clicked, even the bailiff straightened, sensing trouble long before words confirmed it. Judge Judy watched from the bench with still, surgical calm, an expression that held more intelligence in silence than most people expressed in a full speech. She did not raise her head immediately. She simply shifted her eyes, studying the mayor's wife with the kind of quiet precision that made Arrogance nervous without knowing why. The mayor's wife smiled at her. It was not a polite smile, not a respectful one. It was the smile of someone who believed power exempted them from consequence. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a warm, velvet tone sharpened by ego. "I think we can proceed," she said, sweeping her hand as if granting permission. A wave of tension rolled through the gallery. Someone whispered, "Oh no," barely audible, but the whisper felt louder than a shout. Judge Judy lifted one eyebrow, nothing more. Even that tiny movement felt like a gavel strike. "Ma'am," the judge said calmly, "you may take your seat." The mayor's wife did not move. Instead, she tilted her head, studying Judge Judy, as though assessing an employee who had fallen out of line. Mariah's fingers tightened around her folder. Her breathing changed, the shallow rise of someone remembering every intimidation, every veiled threat, every moment she felt powerless. She watched the mayor's wife standing there, radiating the same dangerous confidence she had seen in community meetings, charity events, and late-night confrontations in parking lots. But here, the room did not bend to her. Here, power had rules. And the mayor's wife looked unaccustomed to rules. Slowly, she leaned forward across the table, closing the final inches between defiance and insult. Her voice dropped to a murmur meant only for the judge, but microphones love secrets. What she whispered made the bailiff's jaw clench, made the courtroom suck in a breath, made even Judge Judy's eyes narrow for the first time. Because the mayor's wife whispered, "You should rise when I enter." Judge Judy's fingertips tapped once against the bench, quiet, controlled, a warning shot, and the courtroom braced for what was coming next. Her whispered command still hung in the air like smoke. No one moved, and then the microphones replayed it, soft, clear, undeniable. The faint audio echoed through the speakers, and the entire courtroom stiffened as if the walls themselves had heard something forbidden. "You should rise when I enter." The words replayed with a precision that left no doubt, no misinterpretation. No escape hatch for the mayor's wife to crawl through. But she only smiled. A slow, amused curve of the lips, as if she had been caught saying something adorable rather than outrageous. She finally lowered herself into the chair with the elegance of a queen gracing a throne, adjusting the sleeves of her tailored jacket as the air conditioner hummed a nervous undercurrent behind her. Judge Judy watched this performance with a kind of stillness that was more dangerous than anger. Stillness meant calculation. Stillness meant she had already filed the behavior under pattern. "Let us proceed," the judge said, voice steady as a level line. Mariah swallowed hard and stepped forward, Her shoes made barely a sound on the polished floor, but her heartbeat might as well have been a drum. She held her evidence folder close. The edges frayed from overhandling, fear printed in the fibers. "State your claim," Judge Judy instructed. Mariah opened the folder with trembling fingers. "Your Honor, I'm here because I have been repeatedly threatened, humiliated, and targeted by Mrs. Langford." Her voice wavered, but the truth steadied it. "She used her influence as the mayor's wife to—" "Influence?" Mrs. Langford cut in, laughing lightly. "Darling, I do not influence. I direct." A murmur rippled through the gallery. It was not agreement, it was disbelief mixed with fascination, the same reaction people have when watching someone juggling knives while blindfolded. You know something will go wrong. The only question is how soon. Judge Judy raised a hand. "You will not interrupt the plaintiff." Mrs. Langford tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I'm simply clarifying. As the mayor's wife, I hold certain privileges, diplomatic in nature." Judge Judy blinked once, slowly. "Diplomatic?" "Yes." Mrs. Langford rested her elbows on the table and laced her fingers like she was about to bless the court with wisdom. "City leadership is delicate. My position extends certain immunities." The judge leaned forward slightly, a shift so subtle and yet so potent it felt like the room shrank half an inch. "This is a civil courtroom, not a palace. Immunity does not exist here." The smile faltered. Not much, but enough for the trained eye to see, enough for Mariah to notice, enough for the bailiff to shift his weight, preparing for turbulence. Mariah continued, voice gaining timid strength. "She had her staff block my community events. She spread rumors I was dangerous, and she told me to remember who runs this city." At that, the mayor's wife let out a soft laugh that did not match her eyes. "If you felt intimidated, that is your sensitivity, not my responsibility." Judge Judy's fingers pressed together, forming a steeple. Silence pressed in, thick and anticipatory. "Mrs. Langford," she said, voice cooled to steel, "you seem confused about how this room works." The mayor's wife opened her mouth, ready to retort, ready to reclaim the stage she believed belonged to her, but Judge Judy cut her off with a single sentence, delivered quietly, cleanly, without blinking. "Here, you are not royalty." The words had barely settled before Judge Judy added, "And you are about to learn what that means." Judge Judy's quiet declaration still vibrated through the courtroom air. No raised voice, no dramatic gesture, just truth, sharpened to a perfect edge. The mayor's wife blinked slowly, as if recalibrating. She had expected resistance, mild, symbolic, the kind delivered by people who fear consequences more than conflict. But this was different. Judge Judy's tone carried the weight of someone who had dismantled arrogance so many times that it no longer surprised her, only disappointed her. Mrs. Langford shifted back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other with calculated composure. "Your Honor," she began, voice sweet enough to hide the splinters beneath, "I believe you are misunderstanding my role in this city." Judge Judy leaned forward. The movement was small, but the courtroom felt it like a temperature drop. "Power does not follow you here." That was it. 8 simple words. And yet the room reacted as if she had slammed a gavel. Mariah Dunn exhaled shakily. She had been waiting, years maybe, for someone with authority to say that sentence, someone who would not be intimidated or bought or convinced to look the other way. Mariah clutched her folder tighter, grounding herself, as if the truth finally had a place to land. Mrs. Langford's smile twitched. "You speak as if I am abusing something." The judge did not answer. She simply raised a hand toward the bailiff. "Bring the evidence photos." The bailiff walked to the bench with deliberate steps. A small stack of enlarged photographs landed on the judge's desk with a paper-soft thud that somehow echoed louder than the mayor's wife's earlier arrogance. Judge Judy held up the first photo. "This was taken at a community event last spring. You approached Miss Dunn while she was organizing food distribution." Mariah swallowed, eyes fixed on the picture. The judge turned it around for the courtroom to see. The image captured Mrs. Langford leaning in toward Mariah, smiling, but with eyes that told another story entirely. Her hand rested on Mariah's shoulder, fingers pressing just hard enough to blur the line between touch and threat. Mrs. Langford laughed lightly. "That's a candid moment. I greet everyone warmly." The second photo came up. This one showed two staff members, clearly hers, blocking Mariah's path outside a council meeting. Their smiles held the same artificial shine as department store mannequins. And then the third. A parking lot. Nighttime. Mrs. Langford standing too close, her finger pointed at Mariah's chest while Mariah leaned back, fear evident even through the still frame. The gallery went silent. Not empty silent, heavy silent. Judge Judy's voice softened, but the softness cut sharper than anger. "Do not insult this court with the pretense of warmth." A faint flush crept up Mrs. Langford's neck. She crossed her arms, posture tightening. Mariah lifted her chin slightly, almost unconsciously, like someone finally seeing the ground beneath them solidify. Judge Judy placed the photos down, aligning the corners with meticulous order. "There is a pattern here," she said calmly, "and patterns do not lie." Mrs. Langford opened her mouth, but nothing coherent formed. Confidence faltered, not vanished, but cracked, fine as a hairline fracture on glass. Then the judge gestured toward the clerk. "Bring the sealed folder." The clerk reached beneath the desk, retrieving a thick, sealed envelope, its very presence shifting the air, and Mrs. Langford's eyes widened just for a second before she caught herself. The sealed folder hit the bench with a weight that felt larger than paper, larger than evidence. It felt like consequence arriving, quiet, deliberate, undeniable. Judge Judy rested her fingertips on the envelope without opening it, as though feeling its temperature before lifting its truth. The room stilled. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more softly, like they understood they were no longer spectators, but witnesses. Mrs. Langford sat straighter, a reflexive posture of control, though her eyes betrayed the shift. One quick flash of something sharp and fearful before the mask snapped back into place. "Your Honor," she said with a delicate laugh, "I hope we are not wasting time on dramatics. That folder likely contains misinterpretations, political gossip perhaps. People enjoy creating stories." Judge Judy didn't look at her. She didn't need to. The stillness was answer enough. Mariah's hands tightened around her own worn folder, her nails pressing deep crescents into the cardboard. She had handed over part of what lay in that sealed envelope, but not all. Not the most damning piece. That had come from someone else, someone who feared the mayor's wife more than they feared being caught helping expose her. The judge carefully slit the envelope open. The sound, paper cutting against itself, felt like a blade sliding through ego. She extracted the first document, a neatly printed form with official letterhead. She scanned it silently. The courtroom held its collective breath, waiting for her expression to reveal something. It didn't. Judge Judy remained unreadable, which somehow made the tension worse. She lifted the document and held it up so both parties could see. "This," she said evenly, "is a city requisition request." Mrs. Langford gave a dismissive wave. "Hundreds cross my husband's desk every day." "Yes," the judge replied, "but this one did not go through your husband." She flipped to the second page, turning it so the gallery could see the signature at the bottom. The looping, elegant cursive glimmered under the lights like a taunt. Mrs. Langford's signature, dated, stamped, logged, verified. Mariah lowered her gaze for a moment, overwhelmed by the sight of it, validation made tangible. Mrs. Langford's smile tightened, a hair too thin. "Anyone can forge a signature, Your Honor. Surely you do not take every scribble at face value." The bailiff stepped forward, offering a smaller sheet. Judge Judy tapped it. "This," she said, "is the chain of custody verification. It confirms authenticity. The original document was retrieved from city servers and cross-referenced by 3 separate custodians." A flicker, so fast most people missed it, crossed Mrs. Langford's eyes. Not fear, recognition. She remembered signing something, something she should not have, something she assumed no one would ever see. Judge Judy's voice cut the air. "This request ordered city staff to reroute community resources, effectively choking Ms. Dunn's event attendance for 2 full months, without city clearance, without oversight, without authority." Mariah inhaled sharply. The gallery reacted with soft gasps, whispers swallowed quickly by the judge's glare. Mrs. Langford leaned forward, hands clasped so tightly the tendons stood out like cords. Your Honor, The judge lifted her palm. Before you speak, answer one question. The mayor's wife froze. Judge Judy lowered the document, eyes narrowing with surgical calm. If this signature is not yours, she said quietly, why does the date match the night you were seen leaving the closed council chamber alone? Mrs. Langford's breath caught, just barely, just long enough, revealing the truth her words had not yet dared to betray. For the first time, her confidence did not arrive on command. Her breath hitched, small, quick, but real, and the courtroom felt it. Mrs. Langford smoothed her jacket sleeve with a controlled motion that fooled no one. Her fingers moved too quickly. Her posture lifted too sharply. These were not gestures of poise. They were symptoms of a woman trying to stitch her mask back on before anyone noticed it slipping. Judge Judy did notice. Would you like me to repeat the question? The judge asked, voice soft enough to be dangerous. Mrs. Langford swallowed, her throat tightening at the sound of her own silence. I do not recall being in the council chamber that night. A weak answer. A far cry from the queenly certainty she weaponized minutes ago. Mariah watched, heart beating a conflicted rhythm, satisfaction tangled with sorrow. She never wanted this woman ruined. She only wanted her to stop. The judge lifted the signed requisition slip again, tapping the date with a single fingertip. City cameras place you there at 10:47 p.m., Mrs. Langford. Everyone else had left the building by 9. A rustle moved through the gallery like a breeze through dry leaves. Mrs. Langford's jaw tightened, then loosened, then tightened again, panic experimenting with different disguises. That is irrelevant, she said too quickly. I accompany my husband to official duties all the time. Judge Judy blinked once, slowly. Your husband was out of town that night. The words hit harder than a gavel. Mrs. Langford's face stilled, not with serenity, but with the realization that her usual arsenal of deflection had started to collapse. The rhythm of her breathing shifted, shallow and irregular. Her fingers trembled once before she hid them beneath the table. Mariah felt the shift too. It was the first real sign that the mayor's wife might no longer be untouchable. Judge Judy set aside the requisition slip and reached for another page within the sealed folder. Let us examine what happened after this signature was filed. Mrs. Langford straightened abruptly. After? Your Honor? Ms. Dunn? The judge continued, ignoring her. Did the interference with your community events begin immediately after this date? Mariah nodded, voice steadying. Yes. The very next week, staff were suddenly unavailable. Permits I had already received were misplaced, and whenever I tried to speak with city liaison officers, they told me to take it up with her. All eyes turned toward the mayor's wife. She held her smile like someone gripping the edge of a cliff, tight, desperate, pretending it was intentional. That proves nothing, she said, hands clasped so firmly they shook. People make assumptions about me because of who my husband is. I cannot control that. Judge Judy didn't react. That was somehow worse. She lifted the requisition slip again, aligning its edges with chilling precision. Then explain why your signature appears on a document that directly reroutes staffing assignments away from Ms. Dunn's events. Mrs. Langford inhaled, preparing a retort, but nothing came out. Her lips parted, then closed. Her eyes darted, then steadied. Her nails dug into her palm, leaving small crescents. A crack, a tiny one, but unmistakable. Silence stretched thin across the courtroom, brittle as glass. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. You are welcome to answer, but understand this. Evasion is not a shield in this room. It is an admission. Mrs. Langford finally exhaled, shaky, uneven, and when she looked up, there was something new in her eyes, something that looked a lot like fear. The crack in her composure should have humbled her. Instead, it ignited something sharper, the kind of arrogance that lashes out when cornered. Mrs. Langford lifted her chin with a snap, as if forcing her spine to remember who she believed she was. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but a barbed imitation of one. The faint tremor in her hand disappeared behind a practiced gesture of superiority. Is this what we are doing now? she said, turning toward the gallery as if they were her audience. Allowing jealous, small-minded individuals to weaponize paperwork against community leaders? Mariah flinched as every head swiveled toward her. She pulled her folder close, the way people hold something dear when a storm shifts direction. Judge Judy did not move. And that stillness was becoming the most powerful force in the room. "Mrs. Langford," the judge said, voice steady, "you will address your statements to me, not the gallery." But she was on a spiral now, one forged from ego and fear that had finally met resistance. "She has been obsessed with me for months," Mrs. Langford declared, "attending the same charity events, copying my projects, spreading rumors that I bully her. This entire case is a stunt, an attempt to tarnish the mayor's image through me." Mariah shook her head softly, disbelief tightening her expression. "That is not true. And now she speaks," Mrs. Langford snapped, leaning forward like a predator spotting weakness. "Tell them, Ms. Dunn, how many times you filed complaints that went nowhere. How many times you chased my attention like a child tugging at her mother's sleeve. You practically tripped over yourself trying to insert your little programs into our city initiatives." Mariah's voice trembled, not from fear but from restraint. "My programs serve our neighborhood. They were never about you. You made them about you." Laughter spilled from the mayor's wife, sharp, brittle, artificial. "Oh, sweet girl, everything in this city is about me." The words floated, poisonous and revealing, and Judge Judy caught them instantly. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Is that a fact?" Mrs. Langford pressed a hand to her chest dramatically. "I give this city its reputation. I bring donors. I host international guests. My presence elevates our community." And she gestured toward Mariah with a flick of disdain. "She resents it." Mariah's breaths grew uneven. The hurt was visible, but so was the strength beneath it. "You threatened me," she said quietly. "You told me to remember who runs this city. You said my role was to stay out of your spotlight." "And perhaps it should be," Mrs. Langford snapped, the sharpness of her tone exposing panic, wearing arrogance like borrowed clothing. "Some people simply do not belong on stages they cannot handle." Judge Judy leaned forward slowly, her gaze steady as a scalpel. "Mrs. Langford, are you stating that you intentionally undermined Ms. Dunn's work because her presence threatened your image?" The mayor's wife froze, her mouth opened, but what came out was unfiltered instinct, not strategy. She should have known her place. The gallery gasped. Mariah's eyes widened. Even the bailiff shifted, sensing the shift in the air pressure. Mrs. Langford realized too late what she had admitted. Her hand flew to her lips as though she could shove the words back inside. But the damage was done. Judge Judy did not speak. She only stared at her, long enough for the truth to echo. And then, just as Mrs. Langford tried to recover, the courtroom door opened behind her, revealing a witness she never expected to see. The door clicked open with a softness that contradicted the impact it carried. Every head turned, and the mayor's wife stopped breathing for half a second. A man stepped inside, late 30s, conservative suit, posture stiff as if held up by nerves alone. His eyes avoided Mrs. Langford instinctively, the way people avoid looking at a fire that once burned them. The bailiff motioned him forward, and each step he took made her shoulders tighten further. Judge Judy glanced at the clerk. "This is the witness you notified us about?" "Yes, Your Honor. He stated he wished to testify." Mrs. Langford's composure ruptured into panic-threaded outrage. "He has no right to be here. He is a disgruntled employee, fired months ago. His presence is irrelevant. No, it is malicious." The man did not look at her. He looked at the judge, and that alone was enough to shift the balance of the room. "State your name," Judge Judy instructed. "Elias Warner," he said, voice trembling in the first syllable but steadier in the last. "I worked for the mayor's office, technically for Mrs. Langford as her community outreach coordinator." Mrs. Langford slammed her palms onto the table. "Lies. You assisted my husband, not me." Elias swallowed. "Everyone knew who really gave the orders, ma'am." The gallery stirred, soft murmurs, uneasy glances, the quiet hum of people absorbing a truth they had long suspected, but never heard spoken aloud. Judge Judy raised a hand, silencing the room with a single gesture. "Mr. Warner, why have you come forward now?" His eyes flicked to Mariah, apology and guilt woven together, and then returned to the judge. Because I can't carry it anymore, and because he nodded toward Mariah, deserves the truth. Mrs. Langford leaned back, folding her arms with icy contempt. This is pathetic, truly. He is inventing drama to punish me for letting him go. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. He says he handled your orders. You say he never worked directly under you. Both cannot be true. Mr. Warner, continue. Elias inhaled shakily. There were tasks we were told to carry out for her, things that made no sense at the time but became clear later. Blocking permits, misplacing documents, showing up at community events to monitor certain individuals. Mariah's breath hitched. She looked down, blinking through the weight of resurfacing memories. Mrs. Langford scoffed. You see? He admits nothing illegal, only routine oversight. But Elias wasn't finished. He clasped his hands tightly. There were also instructions about Ms. Dunn. We were told she was interfering with the city's image, that she needed to be managed. Judge Judy sat straighter. Managed? Elias nodded, throat tightening. That was the word she used. The mayor's wife shifted, her foot tapping once beneath the table in a rhythm that betrayed her mounting panic. This is absurd. He is twisting harmless phrases to appear sinister. Elias finally looked at her, just once, before dropping his gaze. I am not twisting anything. I am confessing. The room stilled. Confession. A word that changes gravity. Judge Judy leaned in. Mr. Warner, why are you coming forward today? He took a long, shaky breath. Because I need to tell the truth now. And then, with every eye fixed on him, Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, metallic, something that made Mrs. Langford's face drain of color. The object glinted under the courtroom lights, a tiny flash of metal that made Mrs. Langford finally lose her practiced breath. Elias held the flash drive in his trembling hand, its silver edge catching the fluorescent glow like a blade reflecting daylight. It looked small enough to lose between couch cushions, yet the weight of it shifted the entire room. Even the air felt different, denser, charged, waiting. Judge Judy nodded to the bailiff. Please bring it forward. The bailiff approached, palm outstretched, and Elias placed the flash drive into his hand, with the careful precision of someone surrendering evidence that had kept him awake at night. His fingers lingered a second too long, as if releasing it meant releasing something inside himself as well. Mrs. Langford stood abruptly. Absolutely not. That device contains private city files, restricted information. He's breaking protocol by even possessing it. Judge Judy turned toward her with a look so measured it could slice granite. Sit. The single word hit like a command backed by an entire legal system. Mrs. Langford hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then she lowered herself back into her chair, trembling anger disguised as composure. The bailiff connected the flash drive to the court's monitor. A soft electronic chime filled the silence, the sound of truth preparing to speak. Proceed, Judge Judy said calmly. The first audio file crackled to life, static, a faint shift of movement. Then, Mrs. Langford's voice, sharp, cold, commanding. Do not let her event proceed. I do not care what you have to do. Make it disappear. Mariah's hands flew to her mouth. Several people in the gallery gasped. Mrs. Langford shut her eyes, as if hoping the sound itself might vanish if she refused to witness it. Another clip followed. You tell Ms. Dunn that permits are unavailable. If she argues, remind her she does not have the kind of support I do. And another. I want her out of my way. I will not compete with a nobody. Make it happen. Each sentence struck like a hammer, flattening any remaining illusion of innocence. Elias stood frozen, shoulders trembling, as though finally unburdening himself took every ounce of courage he owned. Mariah fought tears, her breath fluttering unevenly, the recordings validating wounds she had carried in silence, the humiliation, the fear, the helplessness. Now played aloud, the courtroom became an echo chamber of every moment she had been dismissed or threatened. Mrs. Langford lunged forward. These are edited, spliced. He manipulated the files. He hated working under me, and now he is retaliating. Judge Judy held up a hand. Enough. Her voice wasn't loud, just unshakable. Mr. Warner, she continued, eyes fixed on Elias, Are these recordings authentic? Yes, Your Honor. His voice cracked, but the words stood firm. I recorded them because I needed proof. I feared someday I would be blamed for her orders. Mrs. Langford shook her head in disbelief, desperation crawling into her tone. You expect anyone to believe this? He is a disgraced ex-employee. Judge Judy leaned forward. The court will examine metadata and timestamps. If these recordings are altered, we will know. That single sentence silenced Mrs. Langford like a switch being flipped. The judge nodded for the next clip. The sound that emerged was the most devastating of all. Her own laughter, low and mocking. She will learn eventually. Everyone does. The room went still. Even Elias closed his eyes. Judge Judy let the silence stretch, allowing the truth to soak into every corner, every breath, every heartbeat in the room. Then she looked directly at Mrs. Langford. Do you deny, she asked, that this is your voice? Mrs. Langford froze. Her lips parted, but no confident lie arrived to rescue her. Because before she could answer, Elias whispered the words that shattered the last of her defenses. There are more recordings, and they get worse. Elias's final words still hovered in the air. There are more recordings, and every person in the courtroom understood. The floor was about to drop. Judge Judy signaled to the bailiff with a firm nod. The quiet scrape of his shoes against the floor sounded louder than the earlier audio files. He connected the flash drive fully, pulling up a folder labeled, simply, L Archive. A chill moved through the gallery. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to pulse, dimming into a more somber hue. Judge Judy folded her hands. Play the next file. The soft click of a mouse echoed, and then her voice returned, Mrs. Langford's voice, this time colder, more calculated than before. Elias, if she keeps pushing, you remind her that I can end every opportunity she thinks she earned. Mariah's breath caught. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was staring at the table in front of her, eyes wet, shoulders trembling in a way that revealed both validation and devastation. Hearing your trauma echoed back in someone else's voice has a unique kind of violence. A second clip followed. This one quieter, more dangerous. You do not let her get ahead. You do not let her be seen. If she tries to speak at an event, pull the plug on her microphone. If she files a complaint, it disappears. Understand? Mariah closed her eyes. A tremor passed through her. The gallery drew in a long collective breath, a sound like moral recoil. But the courtroom did not truly shift until the third recording. Elias flinched as it started. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward. Mrs. Langford stiffened. The clip was only 8 seconds long, but it landed like a blow. I do not care if she cries. I do not care if she begs. She is not going to stand in my light. The final word hit with venom, each syllable weighted with entitlement, light, her obsession with image, her fear of irrelevance, her willingness to erase another human being rather than share space. It was all there, crystallized in 8 seconds. Mrs. Langford shot to her feet. Your Honor, these recordings are taken out of context. You cannot possibly— Judge Judy's palm rose, a quiet gesture, a devastating one. Sit down. The command struck her harder this time. Her knees actually buckled for a brief moment before she sank into the chair, breathing shallowly, chest rising and falling too fast. Judge Judy's voice softened, not kindly, but with the precision of someone handling fragile truth. Mrs. Langford, these recordings demonstrate intent, control, malice, and a clear pattern of emotional and social intimidation. Mariah wiped her cheek quickly, trying to erase the tears before they became visible. But the emotion slipping through was not weakness, it was release, the kind that comes when someone else finally verifies your suffering. Elias looked down at his hands, fingers twisting. There's one more, he whispered. The worst one. The monitor blinked as the bailiff hovered over the last file, its timestamp recent, its title a simple date. Mrs. Langford whispered, almost inaudibly, No, but Judge Judy did not hesitate. Play it. A single chime sounded as the file opened, and the courtroom leaned forward, bracing for a truth that would change everything. Before we continue, tell me this. When someone is finally confronted with the truth they tried to bury, do you believe fear makes them honest, or only more dangerous? The last file loaded slowly, too slowly, as if even the computer hesitated to reveal what came next. A faint crackle drifted through the speakers, followed by distant footsteps and a muffled door closing. The sound quality was clearer, more recent, close enough that the courtroom seemed to shrink around it. Then her voice, the mayor's wife, but not the polished public version. This voice was sharper, edged with something raw and almost frantic. "I am not losing to her. Do you understand? I will not be forgotten. I will not fade into nothing." The echo of those words reverberated like a storm rolling through a narrow valley. Mariah's fingers curled against the table. Her heartbeat seemed to pulse through her shoulders, her throat, her gaze locked on the floor because the audio was almost too much, too close to the moments she lived through, too confirming of a truth she fought to articulate for so long. Elias lowered his head, guilt weighing on his posture, as if gravity had increased just for him. But it was Mrs. Langford's reaction that changed the temperature of the room. She didn't interrupt, she didn't protest, she didn't even blink. Her eyes widened, slowly, painfully, as the version of herself she never intended for daylight was played aloud for strangers, cameras, the judge, and most devastatingly, herself. The clip continued, her voice rising in a desperate crescendo. "You tell her she can try all she wants, but I decide who shines in this city. Not her, not anyone else, me." A small, broken sound escaped from Mrs. Langford's throat. It wasn't loud, it barely registered above the recording, but it felt like glass cracking in silence. Then the file cut off. No more words, no more noise. Only the kind of quiet that wraps itself around a room when everyone is afraid to breathe wrong. Judge Judy let the silence sit. She didn't rush to speak. She understood the weight of moments like these. She allowed the truth to hover, to settle, to bruise. Finally, she turned to Mrs. F. Langford. "Do you deny this voice is yours?" Mrs. Langford opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She tried again, no sound. Her lips trembled, her shoulders folded inward, collapsing the posture she had worn like armor since the moment she stepped through the courtroom doors. The diamonds on her wrist glinted as her hand rose shakily to her mouth. The word broke midair. Her voice splintered into pieces she couldn't gather. Judge Judy watched with an expression that was not cruel, not triumphant, just steady. The look of someone witnessing a truth long overdue. "This is your opportunity," the judge said softly. "Clarity is not a punishment. It is a choice." Mariah lifted her eyes then, not with vindictiveness, but with the quiet ache of someone who had waited years for accountability, never revenge. Mrs. Langford's breath came in jagged fragments. I didn't want to disappear," she whispered. "I didn't want to be nobody." The courtroom felt her words more than it heard them. Fear, not power, not ego. Fear, raw and unguarded. Judge Judy leaned forward. "So you chose to destroy someone else's light to protect your own?" Mrs. Langford closed her eyes. Tears gathered, unshed, unacknowledged, but visible enough to signal the first real break. And just as she began to crumble, Judge Judy turned to Elias with a new, sharper question, one that threatened to expose an even deeper layer of truth. Judge Judy's question sliced through the quiet like a clean blade. The courtroom leaned in, because everyone sensed the next truth would not come from Mrs. Langford, but from Elias. Elias straightened, though the motion looked painful, as if honesty itself weighed heavily on his spine. Judge Judy fixed him with a deliberate, grounding gaze. "Mr. Warner," she said, tone steady but edged with gravity, "earlier you mentioned you were afraid of something. Afraid of what would happen if you didn't follow her orders. I want you to answer that now, clearly." Elias swallowed hard. His eyes flicked toward Mrs. Langford, only for a second, but the look carried years of intimidation. She froze, breath held tight, bracing herself like someone expecting a blow. Finally, Elias spoke. "I was afraid of her," he whispered, "afraid of what she could do to my job, my reputation, my family." A few gasps slipped through the gallery. Mrs. Langford's fingers curled against the table, knuckles whitening. This is ridiculous, but Elias kept going, voice trembling but unstoppable. She told me once that people who forgot their place would end up jobless, that she could make one phone call and have me reassigned across the state. She said she could get my wife's business audited if I ever disappointed her. Mariah pressed a hand to her heart, horrified. Judge Judy's expression darkened, controlled, but unmistakably disturbed. Did she target your family directly? Elias hesitated, and that silence said enough, but he still answered. One night she called me after midnight. Her voice was different, panicked, angry. She said she felt people weren't respecting her, that they were forgetting who she was. He exhaled shakily. She told me that if I didn't keep Ms. Dunn in check, she'd find another way to remind the city of her power. She didn't say what that meant, but her tone, his voice dipped. It scared me. All the while, Mrs. Langford stared straight ahead, not blinking, not breathing, like someone watching their reflection shatter. Mariah's hand lowered slowly from her chest. You were threatened too, she whispered, realization soft and devastating. Elias nodded. But then, just as the room absorbed this new layer of truth, something shifted in Mrs. Langford, a sharp inhale, a tremble along her jaw, eyes that darted toward Elias with a pain that didn't look like anger anymore, but recognition. Because beneath the collapsing arrogance, a deeper truth was surfacing, one she had never spoken aloud. Your Honor, she whispered, voice fragile, fraying at the edges. They were all going to forget me. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't even an excuse. It was a confession, raw, unpolished, and terrifyingly sincere. The courtroom froze. Judge Judy leaned forward. Explain. Mrs. Langford's lips trembled. Once my husband won the election, everyone cared about him, not me. I became decoration, a backdrop. Her voice cracked. I was afraid of fading, afraid that if I wasn't the center of attention, I'd disappear. The entire courtroom felt the vulnerability beneath her words, not sympathy, but understanding of the fear that drove her cruelty. Yet, Judge Judy's eyes sharpened, seeing beyond the vulnerability to the truth beneath it. Mrs. Langford, she said quietly, you weren't afraid of being forgotten by others. Mrs. Langford blinked. You were afraid of being forgotten by yourself. The words hit her like a blow, because they weren't just true. They were the truth she had been running from. Mrs. Langford's eyes widened, tears spilling for the first time, not from shame, but from the shock of realizing Judge Judy had just named the fear she had never dared to face. Her tears didn't fall loudly. They slipped down in silence, as if even gravity understood this moment required gentleness. The courtroom, moments ago buzzing with shock, fell into a quiet that felt almost reverent. No one moved, no one whispered. The fluorescent lights hummed above like distant static, a faint soundtrack to the unraveling of a woman who had built her identity out of polished surfaces and brittle pride. Judge Judy watched Mrs. Langford closely, not with pity and not with anger, with a measured, almost clinical curiosity, because this was the part most people never saw, the moment when the mask didn't just slip. It crumbled. Mrs. Langford wiped at her cheek, startled by her own tears as though they betrayed her. She tried to sit taller, to reassemble the posture she'd worn like armor, but posture couldn't hold back truth. Mariah sat across from her, torn between years of pain and the unexpected sight of her tormentor unraveling. Her brows furrowed, not in resentment, but in something more complicated. Empathy was a difficult thing in moments like this. Judge Judy folded her hands. Mrs. Langford, you weaponized influence to keep yourself from disappearing. That fear does not excuse your actions, but it does explain them. Mrs. Langford's breath hitched. She looked up, eyes red but clear, as if seeing the judge, not as an adversary, but as someone holding a mirror she could no longer avoid. All my life, she began softly, voice trembling, people only valued me for how I stood beside someone important. First my father, then my husband. I learned that being noticed was survival, and when people stopped noticing, her voice cracked. I panicked. The words hung there, delicate as thin glass. Mariah listened, jaw tightening. You punished me, she said quietly, for wanting to help the community, for existing in a space you felt wasn't big enough for both of us. Mrs. Langford closed her eyes. I know. And you tried to erase my work, Mariah added, her voice not harsh but steady, because you thought it would erase you. Tears streamed down again, faster this time, without permission. Mrs. Langford pressed her palms against her eyes, as if she could push the truth back inside. Judge Judy leaned forward, voice gentle but unyielding. Mrs. Langford, power that is built on fear is not power. It is desperation in disguise. The woman lowered her hands slowly, revealing a face no longer manicured into perfection, but raw, human, exhausted. I thought if I kept everyone beneath me, she whispered, I would never have to look at what was beneath me. A soft exhale rippled through the gallery. Not judgment, not sympathy. Recognition of a universal truth tucked inside a specific failing. Judge Judy's tone shifted, carrying the weight of both compassion and consequence. This courtroom is not here to destroy you. It is here to reveal you. And what we have seen is someone who allowed fear to guide cruelty. Mrs. Langford nodded, a small, broken motion. Mariah watched her with steady, conflicted eyes. The emotional terrain between them was shifting, slowly, painfully, but undeniably shifting. Judge Judy tapped her pen once, a sound that signaled transition. Mrs. Langford, I need you to answer one more question. Mrs. Langford lifted her gaze, bracing for impact. Who are you? The judge asked softly. Without the title you've been hiding behind? Mrs. Langford opened her mouth, but no answer came. Only the quiet collapse of a truth she had never dared to face. The question lingered in the courtroom like incense, soft, fragrant, impossible to ignore. Who are you without the title? Mrs. Langford's lips parted, but nothing emerged. She stared at Judge Judy, eyes glistening, breath trembling in shallow waves. Words had always been her weapon, her shield, her spectacle, her armor. But now, language abandoned her. Not a single excuse or elegant lie rose to save her. Because you cannot speak a truth you have never learned to live. Mariah watched her, chest tight. It was strange, painfully strange, to see the woman who had once towered over her, who had spoken threats like lullabies, sitting small, stripped of power, stripped of certainty. Vulnerability felt foreign on Mrs. Langford, but it was unmistakably real. The gallery remained silent, studying her the way people study a fallen monument, not with pity, but with awe at how something so solid could crumble so quickly. Mrs. Langford swallowed, the muscles in her throat tightening visibly. I don't know, she whispered. The admission drifted through the air, fragile and bare. She looked down at her hands, perfectly manicured, trembling despite the polish. I've spent my whole life being someone's daughter, someone's wife, the face of a campaign, the name on an invitation, and every time someone applauded, I thought it meant I mattered. Her voice wavered. But when the applause stopped, she didn't finish. Judge Judy did not soften, but she did lean in, elbows resting gently on the bench. Mrs. Langford, identity built on applause will always lead to silence, and silence terrifies people who don't know how to sit with themselves. A soft sound escaped Mariah's throat, something between agreement and ache, because she understood what it meant to fight to be seen. She just never realized how deeply someone like Mrs. Langford feared disappearing. Mrs. Langford shook her head slowly. I punished her because she reminded me of who I used to want to be. Someone who helped people without expecting anything, someone people admired for goodness, not status. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and I hated that. Mariah inhaled sharply, shocked at the honesty, at the brutal self-awareness she had never expected to hear. Judge Judy's voice lowered, controlled and steady. Recognizing truth does not erase harm, but it does open a path to accountability. Mrs. Langford nodded, tears dripping freely now. The diamonds on her wrist looked strangely out of place, like relics from another version of her. The courtroom felt different suddenly, not lighter, but more human. The judge turned to Mariah. Ms. Dunn, would you like to say anything before we proceed? Mariah hesitated. Her gaze traveled from the judge to Mrs. Langford, seeing not the bully, not the symbol of privilege, but a wounded person who had projected her pain outward like a spotlight. she began softly. I wanted to exist. I wanted to help my community. I never wanted to compete with anyone, least of all you. Mrs. Langford bowed her head, her shoulders collapsing inward as if absorbing the truth like a blow she had earned long ago. Judge Judy nodded slowly, allowing the moment to settle. Thank you, Ms. Dunn, she straightened, preparing the court for the next step. Mrs. Langford, she said, voice firm again, we will now move into the question of consequences. The room held its breath. Judge Judy folded her hands atop the bench, her gaze sharp and unblinking. Let us begin, she said, and Mrs. Langford's eyes filled with a new kind of fear, the fear of finally being held accountable. Mrs. Langford's breath quivered in her chest, not from rage this time, but from the quiet terror of realizing the performance was over and the reckoning had finally begun. Judge Judy's gaze settled on her, steady and measured, the kind of look that didn't punish, but didn't waver either. Truth had been spoken, pain had been aired, and now came the part that always mattered most, what each person was willing to do with the truth. Mrs. Langford, Judge Judy began, voice calm yet edged with clarity, your actions have harmed not only Ms. Dunn, but the integrity of your community. Influence is a responsibility, not a weapon, and you misused yours deliberately. Mrs. Langford's shoulders hunched forward, shrinking under the weight of the words. For the first time in the entire trial, she didn't try to interrupt, didn't prepare a rebuttal, didn't even lift her chin. She just listened, jaw trembling, eyes glossy. Judge Judy continued, this court cannot determine your self-worth. Only you can do that, but this court can determine the consequences of your behavior. A faint murmur rippled through the gallery. Mariah watched with a mixture of resolve and relief, her own breathing finally slowing, as if her body was just beginning to understand that someone was protecting her now. The judge turned to the clerk. Please record the following orders. Her voice dropped into a cadence that carried the full force of justice. Mrs. Langford, you will issue a formal written and verbal apology to Ms. Dunn. It must acknowledge your actions truthfully, without minimizing or reframing the harm done. You will pay restitution to Ms. Dunn for the disruptions to her events and the emotional distress caused by your intimidation. You will also complete 100 hours of community service, not as a figurehead, not as a photo opportunity, as a participant. Mrs. Langford blinked hard. Community service, doing what? Judge Judy didn't hesitate. You will work under the same community initiatives you tried to sabotage. The words struck with the weight of poetic justice. Mariah's eyes widened, a small gasp escaping her, not in triumph, but in astonished fairness. Mrs. Langford's breath stuttered. You mean I'll be serving under her? Under Ms. Dunn's direction and supervision, Judge Judy clarified. You will contribute, not control. Support, not overshadow. Learn, not command. A deeper crack traveled across the mayor's wife's composure. Her lips parted, shaky, but she didn't speak. Couldn't. Because the punishment wasn't humiliation, it was humility. The gallery watched her struggle with it, not the hours or the apology, but the idea of handing her hands, her time, her presence to the very woman she once tried to erase. Judge Judy softened her tone, just barely. Mrs. Langford, this is not designed to break you. It is designed to rebuild you. A tear slipped down Mrs. Langford's cheek, then another. She didn't wipe them away this time. Mariah exhaled, a breath she had carried for years, finally released. Her expression was not proud, it was peaceful, relief, closure, a quiet victory rooted not in winning, but in healing. Judge Judy tapped her pen once. Before I deliver my final judgment, Mrs. Langford, I need to know one thing. The courtroom leaned in. Do you understand why these consequences are necessary? Mrs. Langford lifted her gaze, slowly, her eyes raw, stripped of vanity, stripped of armor, and she whispered, yes. Judge Judy closed the case file gently, her fingers pausing on the cover. Then it's time, she murmured, for my final ruling. Before we reach the final judgment, do you think consequences can genuinely change a person, or do they only reveal who they always were? The courtroom felt suspended in a soft, heavy quiet, the kind that gathers right before a final truth lands. Judge Judy rested her palms lightly on the bench, posture balanced and resolute. No anger, no triumph, just a calm assurance that what she was about to say would bring the story to its rightful end. "Mrs. Langford," she began, voice gently commanding, "this court has heard your explanations. We've witnessed your fear, your denial, your desperation, and finally, your truth. Now it is time to face the consequences, not as punishment, but as responsibility." Mrs. Langford nodded weakly. Her eyes were blotched and swollen, stripped of the practiced fierceness she had carried like a badge. In their place was something quieter, fragility, maybe, or understanding. Judge Judy continued, "You used your influence to silence another woman, to diminish her light in order to protect your own. But today, you recognized something most people never do. The real threat was never Ms. Dunn." She paused. The threat was the empty space inside you that applause could never fill. A ripple of quiet understanding traveled through the gallery. Mariah felt something loosen in her chest, not vindication, not even forgiveness yet, but a kind of emotional release she had been denied for too long. She clasped her hands together. Grounding herself in the moment, she finally felt safe. Judge Judy glanced toward Mariah. "Ms. Dunn, you showed remarkable restraint and courage. This court acknowledges your persistence in seeking justice, even when institutions failed you." Mariah's eyes glistened, but she offered a small, grateful nod. Then the judge returned her focus to Mrs. Langford. "Your restitution will compensate Ms. Dunn for the harm done. Your community service will realign your actions with genuine service, not social image. And your apology, both written and spoken, will be your first step toward confronting the part of yourself that chose cruelty over compassion." Mrs. Langford swallowed hard. "I understand, Your Honor." But Judge Judy wasn't finished. "However," she said, voice dipping into something softer but sharper, "no court can teach you what identity truly is. You will have to discover that on your own, beyond titles, beyond status, beyond applause." Mrs. Langford lifted her gaze. For the first time, she didn't look at the judge like an adversary or an obstacle. She looked at her like a guide, someone who had carved through every layer of her facade until only truth remained. "I will try," she whispered. Judge Judy nodded. "Trying is the beginning. Accountability is the bridge. Growth is the destination." She picked up her gavel, the wooden handle glinting under the lights. "This matter is settled." The sound wasn't harsh. It was final. A door closing on arrogance, a new one opening on humility. Mariah let out a quiet breath, shoulders lowering as though she'd finally set down a weight she'd carried for years. Elias wiped a tear discreetly, relieved to no longer hold the burden of secrets. Mrs. Langford rose slowly from her seat. She didn't look like a disgraced socialite or a humiliated antagonist. She looked like someone standing at the edge of a new, uncertain beginning, raw, humbled, human. As she passed Mariah on her way out, she paused. Her lips parted. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mariah nodded gently. "I hope you heal." Mrs. Langford blinked, tears gathering again. This time, not from fear, but something that resembled gratitude. She walked out of the courtroom without her mask, without her title, without the illusion of power she once worshipped, just herself, for the first time. Judge Judy watched her go, then closed her file with a soft thud. And as the courtroom emptied, a quiet truth settled over everyone still present. Arrogance always collapses in the presence of truth, but humility can rise from the wreckage.